But I'll start with the fact that we met in January 2005.
Keith Urban stood on stage in Chicago on September 25th, 2025, playing a song he wrote for his wife. But this time, he changed the lyrics. He sang a different woman's name instead. Just 5 days later, divorce papers were filed after nearly 19 years of marriage. Their 2 daughters were 17 and 14. But the real story started years earlier, when Keith began living in a separate house and struggling to hold things together. Tonight, we're uncovering what really happened behind the music, the tour, and the rumors that shook country music. Keith Urban was born in Whangarei, New Zealand on October 26, 1967. His father, Bob Urban, ran a fabric shop, and his mother, Marianne, had Danish roots. And from that Danish side came the first clue. Her grandfather was a street musician in Copenhagen who died broke. No one really noticed this thread back then. When Keith was 2, they moved to a small town in Queensland called Caboolture, barely 8,000 people. No country music radio, no local bands, nothing. In 1971, Bob bought Keith a ukulele for $12 Australian just to keep him quiet on those long 14-hour road trips across the outback. That one decision, meant to silence, ended up opening a door no one saw coming. In 1973, when Keith was 6, Bob reluctantly bought him a $50 second-hand Yamaha guitar from a Brisbane pawn shop. It was supposed to be a phase. Instead, Keith began practicing 6 to 8 hours a day. Within weeks, neighbors were complaining. By age 8, he was going through 3 sets of strings a month, and his hands were so hardened, his school teacher thought he might be getting abused. To keep up, the family cut their grocery budget by 30%. His mother started cleaning offices at night. Keith memorized over 200 country songs before he turned 10. His first teacher, John Edney, charged $3 per lesson, but often refused payment, saying Keith was the most naturally gifted student he'd taught in 25 years. From 1975 to 1980, Keith's parents drove him 52,000 kilometers for talent shows and bar gigs across Queensland. That's more than once around the planet. They slept in their car to save money. In 1978, his mother sold her engagement ring for $180 so he could buy a guitar amp. At 8 years old, Keith won $25 at the Tamworth Junior Country Music Festival. It went straight into groceries. By 10, he was performing 4 times a weekend, making $15 to $30 a night, more than his dad. He missed 47 school days in just 1 year. The education department threatened legal action, but the shows kept coming. At age 10, Keith started skipping school to busk on Brisbane's Queen Street Mall. He made up to $40 a day. His parents found out when the school called. His dad grounded him for 3 months and took away his guitar, so Keith used a tennis racket and practiced fingering without sound. Then a local newspaper snapped a photo of him busking and ran it with the headline, 10-year-old country prodigy. That photo landed him his first real paid gig for $75. From there, it was clear. Music wasn't going away. In 1980, when Keith was 12, he dropped out of Bundaberg High School. His dad was furious. By 13, he joined a local band called The Kids and became their lead guitarist. They played rough Queensland pubs where grown men were drunk and rowdy. Keith earned $200 a weekend, the equivalent of $600 now. Venues ignored his age because he filled the room. He learned to handle hecklers before he even hit high school age. By 15, he entered the 1983 Toyota Starmaker Quest in Tamworth. Out of 1-200 musicians, Keith won with an original song called I that he wrote alone in his room. The prize was $10,000. He used it to buy a sunburst Fender Stratocaster, his dream guitar. That win got him a recording deal and bookings at major Australian festivals. Suddenly, this kid from a town with no music scene was becoming a name. At 21, Keith and drummer Peter O'Keefe formed a band in Sydney called Urban, later known as The Ranch. Between 1988 and 1990, they played more than 300 live gigs, 6 nights a week. They released a self-produced cassette called Keith Urban in 1989, selling 5,000 copies without a record label. Songs like Never Comin' Down became fan favorites. He was building something, but it wasn't stable. In January 1989, after a gig at the Tamworth Festival, a promoter refused to pay him $800. The argument exploded. A beer bottle was thrown. Police arrested Keith for public intoxication. His mugshot hit the front page with the headline, Rising stars fall from grace. He spent the night in jail. The scandal cost him around $15,000 in canceled gigs and legal fees. He went back to construction work to cover the damage. He later called this the lowest point of his early career. Despite the setback, EMI Australia signed him in 1990 for $50,000. He recorded his debut album at Studios 301 in Sydney, the same place INXS had recorded. The album's lead single, Only You, reached No. 98 on the ARIA charts. Within 8 months, the album sold 35,000 copies and went gold. That brought in $125,000 in royalties. EMI offered a 3-album deal worth $200,000. Keith left construction work for good. In 1992, Keith moved to Nashville with only $300. He slept on friends' couches. He worked as a session guitarist for $50 an hour. He did open mic nights at Tootsie's Orchid Lounge and faced 18 months of rejection. At one point, he was so broke, he left a few clothes at a friend's place just to feel like he lived somewhere. He described it as a slow-motion move. There was no breakthrough, just grind. Then, in 1994, he reformed The Ranch with Peter Clark and Jerry Flowers. They signed with Capitol Records and released an album in 1997. It charted at number 34 on Billboard Country. Walk in the Country and Just Some Love made minor waves, but the song Desiree caught the industry's attention. One of the songs from that album, Some Days You Gotta Dance, became a huge hit for the Dixie Chicks in 2001, with Keith playing guitar on their version. But in 1998, everything collapsed. Keith overdosed on cocaine during a Dallas show. He was rushed to rehab at Cumberland Heights. The ranch fell apart mid-tour. Festival slots were canceled. Capitol Records nearly dropped him. The addiction had been building since the mid-90s, fueled by the pressure to break into American country music. The crash destroyed the band. Keith called it the darkest chapter of his life. In 1999, he began to rebuild. Garth Brooks hired him to play lead guitar on Bellow Wood from the album Sevens. That one session paid Keith $20,000. The Dixie Chicks brought him in for Sin Wagon. These sessions quietly pulled him back into the industry. They proved that he could still play, and play well. Critics praised his work. He was back, quietly, without the spotlight. Then came his solo breakthrough. His self-titled album dropped in October 1999. The first 2 singles warmed up the charts. But on February 24th, 2001, But for the Grace of God hit number 1. It stayed there for a week and sold over 1 million copies. That song was co-written with 2 members of the Go-Go's, a wild choice for a country single, but it worked. The album went platinum by 2003. It earned him the 2001 CMA Horizon Award and Top New Male Vocalist at the Academy of Country Music Awards. The turnaround was complete. The kid who practiced 6 hours a day in a tiny town with no country music had finally made it. In October 2002, Keith Urban released an album called Golden Road. It didn't just land on shelves quietly, it roared in. Within days, it hit number 2 on the Billboard Country chart. One of its tracks, Somebody Like You, stayed at number 1 on country radio for 6 straight weeks and made it all the way to number 23 on the Hot 100. But more than that, Billboard later declared it the top country song of the entire 2000s decade. By late 2005, the album had gone triple platinum in the US alone, meaning over 3 million people had bought it. It wasn't a one-hit thing either. 4 songs from Golden Road hit the charts hard. Somebody Like You, Who Wouldn't Want to Be Me, and You'll Think of Me all reached number 1. Raining on Sunday came close too, climbing to number 3. This wasn't just a good moment for Urban. It was the launch of his era. His name started crossing over from country stations to mainstream airwaves. This was also the first time he worked with producer Dan Huff, who would go on to shape much of his sound in the years ahead. But behind the scenes, things weren't easy. While he was riding the wave of commercial success, Urban's personal life was unraveling. During this same period, he ended a long, stormy relationship with Laura Sigler, a veterinary technician he had dated on and off for years. They were even engaged in 2001, but by 2002, it all fell apart. There were whispers about cheating, and Sigler didn't hold back in interviews later. She said the drugs had brought their relationship to really low places. She called Urban probably the darkest part of her past and said he had numerous flings. In her words, his addictive personality would make it hard for him to ever truly make someone happy. While nothing was officially confirmed about the lawsuit, there were rumors around that time of a $500,000 legal dispute with a former manager. No details ever made the headlines, but industry insiders whispered about fights behind closed doors, right when Urban was rising fastest. Golden Road sold over 3.37 million copies across the US, Canada, and Australia. It hit platinum in Australia with 70,000 sales, double platinum in Canada with 200,000, and triple platinum in the US. After the album blew up, Urban stepped out on his first major arena tour in 2003. This was a big shift. No more clubs, no more bars. Now it was big stages, packed seats, and full crowds. Somebody Like You became his first gold-certified single. You'll Think of Me followed the same path, and even snagged him a Grammy for Best Male Country Vocal Performance. There's something else that shaped Urban's path long before Golden Road. In 1988, back in Australia, he went to a John Mellencamp concert on the Lonesome Jubilee Tour. He said it was like being hit by lightning. It wasn't just that he liked what he saw. It changed the way he saw music. Urban later said, "I didn't walk away thinking I want to do that. I walked away feeling I get it." From that moment, he started pouring everything he loved, country, rock, storytelling, into his own sound. Over the years, he covered Mellencamp's songs like Jack and Diane and Hurts So Good. In 2015, the two of them performed Pink Houses together on national TV. That same year, Urban released John Cougar, John Deere, John 3:16, a direct tribute to Mellencamp's influence. Raining on Sunday, one of the standout tracks from Golden Road, wasn't even Urban's song originally. It was written and recorded by Radney Foster in 1998. Foster's version had backing vocals from Darius Rucker. Urban told Foster he loved the album and was going to cut the track for his own record. It ended up reaching number 3 on the charts. Around this time, Urban was going through some serious mental health struggles. Though no official interviews confirm he wrote or recorded it during a depressive episode, the timeline aligns with what's known, that in the early 2000s, he was battling substance abuse and recovering from a toxic breakup. The song's themes, quiet, shelter, searching for peace, hit harder, knowing that backdrop. Just 2 years later, in September 2004, Urban released his 4th album, Be Here. This one debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Country chart. It didn't slow down after that. Be Here sold over 4 million copies, becoming his best-selling album ever. Days Go By, the lead single, stayed at number 1 for 4 weeks and reached number 31 on the Hot 100. It was certified gold fast. The entire album went gold and then platinum within just 6 weeks of release. Urban co-produced it with Dan Huff again and wrote or co-wrote 9 of the 13 songs himself. It earned him 3 ACM awards: Male Vocalist of the Year, Album of the Year, Artist, and Album of the Year Producer. But right when his star was burning brightest, disaster struck. In 2005, Urban developed a large nodule on his vocal cords. His doctor said it was like a callus, built up from years of constant singing. He had to go through emergency laser surgery in Boston. The same specialist who had operated on John Mayer handled the procedure. Urban wasn't allowed to speak for 3 weeks afterward, not even a whisper. He admitted he accidentally spoke a couple of times during recovery, and the sounds he made were so strange they scared him. He was terrified that singing in his sleep might damage his voice. He even emailed his surgeon in a panic after dreaming he was performing You Make Me Feel Like Dancing. But the surgery worked. When he returned to the stage to perform Making Memories of Us at the 2005 Grammys, he described the feeling as like having an artery suddenly unblocked. Then came Tonight I Wanna Cry. The song climbed to number 2 on the country chart and cracked the Hot 100 at number 36. It went platinum and resonated deeply. In a candid Rolling Stone interview, Urban said the song came from a raw place, a breakup in 2003, and the overwhelming feelings he was facing during early attempts at sobriety. His ex told him something that broke him completely. She said, "The novelty of you has worn off." That cut deep. He said it triggered a spiral. More drinking, more drugs. He fell hard into cocaine and ecstasy again, saying the entire late 90s were a dark blur. He admitted that when he wasn't performing, he felt like an alien. Drugs became the way he handled Nashville's brutal music industry pressure. Despite all this, 2005 was also the year he got his first CMA nomination for Entertainer of the Year and won on his first try. That same year, You'll Think of Me, originally from Golden Road, won him another Grammy. There were rumors floating around that he had worked on demo sessions for Carrie Underwood's Jesus, Take the Wheel during this time, though nothing solid confirms it. What is confirmed is that Be Here delivered 5 top 5 singles, including 3 #1 hits, Days Go By, Making Memories of Us, and Better Life, and 2 more that came close. His tour for Be Here raked in over $20 million from just 39 shows, landing him in Billboard's top 25 tours for the first time in 2006. But as the lights shined brighter, his inner world crumbled again. After marrying Nicole Kidman in June 2006, Urban relapsed during a European tour. It was so bad that Kidman had to stage an intervention. He later said, "I caused the implosion of my fresh marriage. It survived, but it's a miracle it did." The pressure of success and being newly married to a global celebrity pushed him past his limits. He said, "One can never let one's guard down on recovery, and I'm afraid that I have." The next album, Love, Pain, and the Whole Crazy Thing, dropped in November 2006 and hit #1 on the Billboard 200. It sold over 1 million copies. The big hit from that record was Stupid Boy, which won him a Grammy in 2008. But when he recorded that album, Urban was battling a major relapse. Kidman was away filming in Rome, and Urban was alone in their Nashville home. Old habits came back. On October 19, 2006, Kidman returned home and found drugs in the house. That night, she staged the intervention that saved his life. Urban checked into the Betty Ford Center the same day, canceling a planned CMA performance and postponing all promo work for the album. I Told You So became one of the album's standout tracks, climbing to #2 on the country chart in 2007. Urban co-wrote it during a rocky moment in his new marriage and admitted that period was just crazy. The album pushed boundaries. Urban and producer Dan Huff leaned into a rock-influenced sound. There were Willian pipes, tin whistles, bouzoukis, instruments rarely heard on country radio. It was experimental, raw, and intense. The album sold over 1 million copies in its first week, but the recording sessions weren't easy. Urban was still recovering and clashed with people creatively. At one point, he fired his entire band during rehearsals for the 2007 tour. The firing happened after explosive arguments about arrangements and musical direction. He had to rehire quickly, just to keep the tour stable. Once in a Lifetime had already broken records by debuting at #17, the highest debuting country single in Billboard's 62-year history at that time, but it never reached #1, peaking at #6. Urban later said he wrote the song for Kidman when she was afraid to marry him. She once told him, "It's a long shot," and that stuck with him. That same year, Everybody was released as the 4th single. It reached #4 and was deeply personal. It was a thank you to Kidman and everyone who supported him through recovery. For the first time ever, she joined him on tour. That 2008 tour, with Carrie Underwood as opener, was one of the top-grossing country tours of the year. When Keith Urban released his 8th studio album on September 10, 2013, it didn't just surprise fans. It split the country music world in two. Fuse shot straight to #1 on the Billboard country charts and hit platinum status in a matter of months. But it wasn't the success that stirred people. It was the sound. The lead single, Cop Car, didn't sound like country at all. It had EDM drops, electronic beats, and the fingerprints of Rick Rubin, the same hip-hop producer known for shaping Jay-Z and Red Hot Chili Peppers. The backlash from country purists was instant and loud, but what most people didn't know was that the version they heard was actually the dialed-back version. Urban had recorded even more experimental takes that never made the final cut. The message was clear. He wasn't trying to blend in. He was breaking the mold on purpose. The controversy only grew a year later. In 2014, Urban's collaboration with rising star Kelsea Ballerini on Raise 'Em Up turned into something bigger than a hit. The song reached #1, but backstage whispers got louder. That summer, Australia's Women's Day magazine published photos of Ballerini leaving Urban's tour bus looking unusually cheerful. She was just the opening act. But some tabloids didn't care. They pushed a story that there was more going on between them. Sources claimed she was hanging around his trailer, acting giddy after late nights on the bus. At the same time, Urban's wife, Nicole Kidman, was already rumored to be growing suspicious. Jealousy had always quietly followed their marriage. Now, it was center stage. Both Urban and Ballerini denied everything, but the timing wasn't great. Urban's name started getting pulled into gossip cycles that didn't fade quickly. Then came 2016. Urban released Ripcord on May 6th, and it became his biggest commercial success yet. #1 debut, platinum certified, and packed with new ideas. Break on Me was recorded using acoustic loops in his Nashville home studio, giving it an intimate feel that somehow still hit mass-market success. Wasted Time won the CMA Single of the Year, and its live shows introduced something no one expected. Nathan Barlow brought out the Phantom, a custom device built with 4 iPads and a mixing board, designed to trigger album samples during performances. For country music, that kind of technology was unheard of. The audience didn't just hear songs, they heard the actual studio versions, played live, in real time. Urban wasn't just making music, he was building new ways to deliver it. But behind the tech and the awards, things were tense. Just before the Ripcord World Tour began, Urban fired his longtime drummer. It happened during rehearsals and came down to tempo arguments. That wasn't entirely surprising to those close to the band. Urban had a reputation. He wanted things perfect, down to every beat. And he wanted someone who could play drums, run samples, and handle keys all at once. That's why he brought in Barlow. The Oceania leg of the tour, co-headlined with Carrie Underwood, grossed over $5.7 million across 6 shows in Australia. Globally, the tour brought in $33.6 million and pulled more than 612,000 fans. But those numbers hid what was really happening behind the curtain. The rehearsal hours, the pressure, the turnover in the band, it was all part of a perfectionism that didn't leave room for slip-ups. In 2017, Urban and Underwood released The Fighter, and it hit #1. The story behind it was more personal than most people realized. Urban wrote it with Busby in London, and later admitted the lyrics were inspired by the early days of his marriage to Kidman. But it was also about their daughter, Faith Margaret, born via surrogate in 2010. Urban wanted the song to capture what it meant to protect the people you love. To get Underwood's vocals on the track, Busby rearranged Urban's entire video shoot schedule because she only had 1 free day in St. Louis. The song became a triple platinum success in the US and quadruple platinum in Australia. Sadly, Busby died of brain cancer in 2019, making this one of his last major works. The song became part of something bigger than a hit. It was a memory. Urban's next album, Graffiti You, came out on April 27, 2018, and it started strong. #1 on the country albums chart, but faded fast. First week sales hit 137,000 copies, but by week 2, it had fallen to number 18 on Billboard 200, with just 17,100 sales. Female, the Me Too-inspired lead single, stalled at number 12, breaking a 2-decade streak of top 10 hits. Never Comin' Down didn't help either, peaking at number 18. Critics panned the album. Rolling Stone gave it 2.5 stars and said Urban seemed lost when trying to innovate. By July 2019, the album had sold only 220 to 400 copies in the US, and barely made gold certification. It was his weakest commercial showing in more than 10 years. At the same time, things at home weren't going well either. Urban gave interviews that hinted at tension with Kidman's schedule on Big Little Lies, and friends later confirmed they'd been living apart since mid-2018. He moved into a separate place. The lyrics in Never Comin' Down weren't just about distance. They were about their distance. When Kidman filed for divorce on September 30, 2025, citing irreconcilable differences, the paperwork listed problems dating back to this exact period. Everything was unraveling, his music career and his marriage, at the same time. Then came 2020. The pandemic shut down the world, and Urban recorded an entire album from home. The Speed of Now Part 1 dropped on September 18th and somehow still reached #1 on the country chart and #7 on Billboard 200. God Whispered Your Name peaked at number 3 and earned a Grammy nomination. Urban had musicians record separately and then pieced it all together in Nashville. He live-streamed shows, joined the One World Together at Home special, and covered Steve Winwood's Higher Love. The album won highest-selling album at the 2021 Queensland Music Awards, but the cost was brutal. His tour was canceled. He lost $10 million. The losses included tickets, production, and deposits. He quietly returned to online AA meetings, trying to hold himself together. His entire touring operation had to be rebuilt from scratch, using drive-in concerts and virtual shows just to survive. His losses were among the highest of any country artist at the time. The collaboration with Post Malone in 2021 changed everything again. One Too Many reached number 1 and crossed 1 billion Spotify streams by 2023. But Urban said it wasn't ambition that made him say yes, it was isolation. He was stuck at home with rising tensions and creative blocks, and just needed someone to work with. The song was recorded virtually, Malone in LA, Urban in Nashville. They never met, and the lyrics, about drinking alone, relationship strain, hit too close to home. The success made Urban question everything. Country fans criticized him again for abandoning the genre, and while his team pushed for more pop and hip-hop features, Urban resisted. He already knew the price was high, and it had cost him more than streams could fix. In September 2024, Urban released High. It debuted at number 14 on the country charts. Messed Up As Me hit number 1 and racked up over 500 million streams. The album had 12 tracks, including a duet with Lainey Wilson. 4 songs were rescued from a scrapped project called 615. The rest were what Urban called cheeseburgers, high energy, carefree, euphoric. Critics said it was his most personal and diverse work in years, but behind the scenes, his personal life was collapsing. Kidman filed for divorce on September 30th, 2025, and sources said she had been trying to save the marriage long before then. They had celebrated their anniversary in June. By the end of September, it was over. They had been married nearly 19 years. Their daughters were 17 and 14. Kidman gained custody. Urban kept touring. The High and Alive World Tour launched just 5 days before the divorce filing on September 25th, 2025, at the United Center in Chicago. Urban played 90 minutes of music, old hits, new songs, no wedding ring. Industry insiders projected the tour could pull in $60 million. He shared the stage with Chase Matthew, Alana Springsteen, and Carly Scott Collins. Urban said what he loved most was seeing people forget their stress for a while and just feel alive. But fans noticed something else. During the show, Urban changed the lyrics of The Fighter, once written for Kidman. He swapped in the name Maggie during the chorus. Maggie Ball was his 25-year-old guitarist. The crowd caught it, so did Instagram. Ball posted the clip with eye emojis. Her father told reporters it was all music, no dating. But then, she skipped the next show, and Urban pulled The Fighter from the setlist completely. Even with all that, Urban kept going. In October 2025, he spoke on a Nashville radio show about his 14 years of sobriety and how his daughters were his anchor. He talked about how Kidman and his friends had intervened back in 2006, just after their wedding, and pushed him toward rehab. He said it saved his life. He said music was still the one thing that grounded him.